Great. So my name is Afi. I'm from Israel originally. I will not introduce myself because I will do it later, but I'm going to speak about how to become 100,000 people startup using Lean and Lean startup principles. But I want to start actually with word of modesty, since we are all Lean senseis and Lean originally coming from Japan. So this is a Kaizen, this is a Zen garden in Kyoto, which you can only see 14 stones out of 15. And whatever you stand in the garden, unless you're a bird from above. And just saying that because I see things from my own perspective based on my own career experience. And I would like to hear yours as well and learn from you as well. So just a word of modesty. So I will share with you some key learnings from leading companies that I'm sure you all know as lean professionals, and some principles for successful startup growth, both theory and practice from my own experience. And the growth from investors' perspective and also the startup founders' perspective. And what it takes, what startups can learn from corporates and what corporates can learn from startups as well. And I would like to do it in a slightly different way and not orthodox presentation, and to share with you a story of Miss Growth and the lady founder based on my own experience as a startup investor as well. So those are the heroes of my stories. Okay, the investor, which is a growth expert, learned history. Actually, she's a Gen X like me. I'm 43. Investor is in startup, and on the other side of the story is a very eager founder. Study AI in MIT. She's a Gen Z, and she's really eager founder to develop her startups. Okay, so the story goes like that. Let me just minimize my own screen. I cannot see the presentation. Right, so the lady founder, as many founders in startups that I met across my career and all over the world. She said, I'm going to change the world. I'll be the next unicorn. Unicorn is a company whose valuation is over $1 billion US. So I'll be the great next thing. And she's super excited. And then the lady Growth say, yeah, listen, it's great. I'm super excited for you. But did you hear about the growth paradox? Hold on, there's something wrong with my screen. Okay. Yeah, so I'm proud of you. But you know, in history, the greatest empires grew up enormously, like monsters, and eventually collapsed and fell. And also in the nature, big trees without very strong roots, when the storms is coming, those trees are collapsing. And I call it the growth paradox, because what I try to teach many startups founders is that if you don't grow strongly right from day one, from the idea phase, you become big companies, and I met those, and then you start falling. Okay, and so you start falling down. This is the growth paradox. So you need to grow in the right way. So let's start learning from different companies around the world. Let's start learning from Starbucks. So I had the opportunity to meet both with Zev Siegel, one of Starbucks founders. I met him 3 times during over the years, and I also had a chance to cooperate with now is the CEO of the Lean Enterprise Institute at the US, Josh Howell. But back then he was responsible for the startups famous Lean transformation in late 2010. And Starbucks grew for 20,000 shops around the world, and actually lost their way both in the customer experience that they had, but also created enormous business problems. For example, they had $1 million per year business problem because of throwing away coffee to the trash. And why was that? Because there was lack of standardization how to make a coffee among 20,000 shops. And I know you're new professionals, you know the importance of standardization. So just baristas used to throw away coffee to the trash. Eventually, coffee is money, it's inventory, it's goods. And they created problem of $100 million per year. So this kind of problems were solved during a very long business transformation that they had in around 2008, and almost got to bankruptcy in 2008 as well. And you can also learn from Ford Motors. Ford Motors had a major global product development operation, problem in their global development product development operation, until they hired the CEO from Boeing, Alan Woolley, who actually did some Genshin Nobutsu, okay? Go to the Gemba, as you all know, and went to interview salespeople and customer across the US, driving himself in different types of Ford Motors cars, just to understand that the truck in the back is too narrow for families to put the child cards. And they wanted a different place for the coffee for them. For Americans, this is an important customer experience. So he took those insights to future product development operation. But what is the most interesting case study, and you call also in Design the Future, it was written by Morgan. It's the case of the Ford Motors for women. So the Ford Motor engineers asked the women, because it was not a market for Ford Motors, it was considered to be a men's car with a very loud engine, but they were missing a very important customer segment and market, and that was the women. So they asked the women, what do you think about the Ford Mustang? And the answer was very, very interesting. They said, and listen carefully, they said, we like bad guys, not assholes. Okay, and they were talking about men. We like bad guys, not assholes. And the designers, the product development teams across the world took those insights and designed the whole new Ford Mustang for women, which is slightly more elegant, still a bad boy car with a great engine, roaring, but slightly more elegant for women. So this is interesting how customer feedback can be taken to global product development. And this is also something that startups can learn from. So the lady founder was saying, nah, don't worry, I'll get huge investment, I will get the money and everything will be okay. I hear startup founders saying that all the time. But actually, if you look at the research, so first of all, 90% of the startups fail. And it's, I will show you some methodologies later, but it's very highly recommended to use those lean methodologies to prevent from failure. So the reason is not actually mainly lack of focus, ignoring customer needs, market fit, etc., etc. So there are many reasons for startups failure, but it's usually not funding. It's not the main reason. So the lady founder continues saying, yeah, you know, but if you look at the lean startup definition, Eric Ries wrote the famous book called Lean Startup, and he's mentioning that this is an evolution of what Toyota did in the lean principles. And he defined it as a human institution that designed a product or service under extreme uncertainty, conditions of extreme uncertainty. And this is true. Startups are operating under extreme uncertainty. Also, by the way, companies and corporates nowadays. But there is another way, and this is what the Lady Gross is trying to say. There is another way to look at this definition, and this is the human institution part, because the human applies that there are people to manage, and I will talk about principles for, and you know about principles of lean management, and the institution also applies that there are processes. And actually, there are processes in the startup starting from day one, even if it's a 5 people startup. And the startups can learn a lot about managing processes and improving processes from bigger companies and from the lean principles itself. And so the first principle is entrepreneurship is the type of management, okay? And so Eric Ries also say it's a type of management under extreme uncertainty, but there are things that you need to be managed, and it's not any excuse for chaos, because many startups say, no, it's a chaotic environment, we are trying. It's not. This chaos needs to be managed. And this growth is very hard and systematic work, and there are principles to follow that I will share with you also for startups growth. And then the first principle is to focus on customer experience. Okay, great Steve Jobs always said you need to start with the customer experience and go backward to technology, and not vice versa. I really like this statement, and Apple is the perfect example. The way they designed the old iPod wheel and the whole new customer experience they invented in Apple Store, and those terrific phones. So it's very important principle. And if you also listen to, let's say, the late Professor Christensen from Harvard, he said that the customer experience should be like smoking cigarettes. And why I like smoking cigarettes? Because it needs to provide you emotional experience. Okay, when you smoke a cigarette, you calm yourself down. It's phenomenal, well known. It's also provide you functional experience because the nicotine is very addictive, so the body reacts. So it's a functional experience, but it's also a social experience because people are smoking in groups, and it's a way to communicate. It's a way to make friends. It's a way to make business even. So it's both emotional, functional, and social experience. And every customer experience should be examined in those 3 dimensions. So focus on customer value and experience first, a well-known principles for any lean professional as well. And in that matter, you need to learn from Starbucks. This is the photos from their innovation lab in Seattle. First of all, they experiment with the different type of machine to increase efficiency of their coffee and beverage production. And they innovate with different types of flavors. They're doing hackathons. They invite people from the street to taste different flavors and to see what's working and what's not working for the specific customers. And they're modeling the whole customer experience from the moment you step into the shop, by the way, till you get your coffee and go out. So they're modeling the step-by-step customer experience, and you can see the mapping behind. So they're modeling and mapping and improving and innovating with every step of the experience. So that's actually the thing to learn from Starbucks nowadays. And the lady founders say, yeah, it's great, but I want to be Google. I want to have a nice office. It's well known that Google offices, when you can play during the breaks, in encouraging innovation and creativity. This is true, but actually, and this is what the lady founder, the Lady Gross say, the most important things to learn from Google are different things. It's nice to have a cool office, okay, but Google is doing for every new product, for every new idea, for every new process, they do design thinking, which I'll elaborate later, and they experiment with different things, and they are sparking with imagination, as they say, and fuel with data. So, and this is obviously principle. Okay, when you do A3 problem solving, you need to focus on the current data, what the current situation, what is actually happening, and then provide countermeasures. So it's the same principles for design thinking and A3, for example. And it's also important to learn the objective and key results, because it shows when everybody is aligned. And of the Google way to do it was invented by Intel actually, but the way they do it, this is their Hoshinkanri, this is the deployment process. So everybody is aligned to the most important things to be measured, and the most important outcomes and objectives. And the research shows that if you're aligned and you do the right things, there is also room for more creativity and innovation. So this is what you actually need to learn from Google. And I call it fall in love with the PDCA, PDSA. You probably know that better than me. It's plan, do, check, adjust, or study, adjust. And the whole creation of startups, the whole creation of new products should be based on that, on this scientific thinking, the Demian scientific thinking. And in that matter, you need to fail, and you need to fail fast, because to fail slow, it's very costly for startups, because you consume all the money very fast, and especially if you're investing your own money or investors' money. So you need to be oriented and as an MVP thinker, and I will elaborate, minimum valuable product. Okay, so you don't develop a house until you realize that this is what the customer wants. So you start with the drawing of a house and then actually develop. And imagine you're probably, most of you working in corporates and bigger companies. Imagine you're in a corporate, you're coming to your manager and say, no, I didn't meet the objectives for this quarter, but I learned a lot about the customer experience. You'll probably be fired the day after. But this is not the case in startup, because learning about the customer and the product market fit, it's more important in these early stages. So this is the startup way of thinking. And in that matter, you don't develop donuts with topics before you understand that your customer segment actually want a donut, and then you only iterate and add the topics. And why am I saying donuts? Because there is another business case which is interesting. In Israel, for example, the American Dunkin' Donuts entered Israel as a market. They opened like 3 or 4 shops. They put a lot of investment, a lot of money, just to understand that in Israel, it's not a country that people are eating donuts. They're eating donuts slightly before Hanukkah, which is the Jewish equivalent to Christmas, and slightly after Hanukkah. In the rest of the year, there is no customer demand. People are healthy, very fit. They don't eat donuts. It's not like the Americans that every cup, every person is eating donut for breakfast. So Dunkin' Donuts failed after investing a lot of money and took their stuff back to the US. So it's important to understand that to develop an MVP, to test it in the market that you're trying to enter, and then develop it further. So it's really interesting case study, and this is the MVP approach and PDCA approach of the lean startup. And if I try just to connect it to the theory, so it's developing, it's ideation, developing ideas, and building it into product. And you develop this really minimum resources that will provide also the minimum value to your customer. And then you measure what is happening. The literature call it innovation accounting. So you manage how customers are reacting and the customer behaviors, and you have to learn based on those data, and you have to develop some assumptions best for the value for adding to the customers, if it's the right value or wrong value, and also about the growth assumption. Okay, so you need to make sure you have also that the ability to grow the product and scale it on the global level. So you have to learn about the assumptions of value and growth together. And this is a closed loop, so it's repeating itself all the time. And there are also leading companies, corporates who are testing new products all the time. And this is the methodology to do that. All right, and of course you want to minimize this loop and reduce the lead time of failure, or the lead time of new product development, which is a common practice in any operation, any lean operation. And the next principle is more cultural. Okay, it's a welcome problem. It's this is Houston. We have a problem from Apollo 13. It's good, you know, better than anybody else. It's good to have problems because problems are the base for continuous improvements. If you don't have room for improvement, it's meaning your future is really going to end. There's no way to grow, so it's good to have problems. And this is more cultural. Many founders don't understand that it's good to have problems. And you have to be in a growth mindset and lean mindset. And this is thank you for the Lean Enterprise Institute. So the optimist will say, okay, I have a half full glass, and the pessimist will say the glass is half empty, so it's bad. But I tried always to be in a lean mindset, to understand why do you need a double-sized glass when it's actually needed, because half full, half empty, it's also unnecessary resources. So this is a growth mindset and a lean mindset that is important also in the startups environment. And the next one, I call it the founder syndrome, because there are many young founders of startups and not young founders for startups that think they know everything, and they invented the wheel. Nobody invented the wheel except for the person that invented the wheel. So the principles, and I always say to my teams, my management approach is not when I'm wrong. If you tell me that I'm wrong, I will kill you. Okay, I tell my teams my approach. If you tell me that I'm right, I will kill you. So I know that I always tell my teams, I know that I'm successful and smart. I don't need you to tell me that and tell me that I'm right all the time. I want you to tell me where I'm wrong. That's why I'm paying you for. And this is a very important principle in the lean management, to seek for this continuous improvement, both in the team and also as a manager. So no founder syndrome in a startup. And you need to understand your mess. You're well familiar with value stream mapping, and trust me, it's working for hundreds of people and thousands of people operations, and it's relevant to 10 people startups operations, because there is always a mess with the information flow and the value flow to the customers, and there's always a problem to solve. So I tell startupists, you need to understand your mess as well. We are doing together value stream mapping even in 10 people startup. And I encourage them to Genshin Gebutsu, to go to the Gemba. And I like this. This is a photo of McDonald's actually in Wilanów in Warsaw. And I think this is the best management business school, like live business school that you can imagine, because the way that the McDonald's developed their managers to address the customers, to address the customer needs as the operation goes, and take it live as it's going back to the kitchen, back to the back office operations, and to improve the current operations in the current shift. They are mastering that, and it's super important for young startup founders to learn these management practices that McDonald's, after so many years of activities, have managed to apply for I don't know, countless shops that they have around the world, and those management practices. So go to the Gemba, understand your customers. It's very true for a corporate, for Ford Motors. It's very true to any startup founder to learn exactly how the customer reacting, what are their needs. And the last principle is the worst type of talent, as the Japanese said, it's not listening to your people, and the talent neglection is the worst type of waste. So I always tell the startupists, you have to listen to your people, you have to work for your people. Okay, as one of most famous Toyota managers that I had the chance to meet said, I worked for he said 3,000 people, and this is not semantics, okay? Because he was encouraged them to learn, encouraged them to be better, and encouraged them to suggest ideas for improvement. That's why he was working for them, and not they are working for him. So worst type of waste, as you all know. So eventually growth, as you know, the 4 Ps model is to align the business purpose and the strategy to the process, to the people, while problem solving is the engine for everything. Because there is always, and tell it to young founders, there will always be COVID, always be crisis from different types. So you need to master this 4 Ps all together to be ready for the next crisis. So the lady founder, and usually when I present it to the young founders and not to lean professionals, they say, yeah, it's a very nice theory, very nice lecture, but it's only a theory. But actually, no, it's a practical system. And then let's now just to drill down how it's really working in real life. So first of all, I think the most important, and I encourage every new idea that I meet to do the lean canvas, to start from the problem to solve and the customer segment, and what is this actually the solution, and what is the key metrics. And this is very similar to A3 actually, because it's based on scientific thinking. So you have to do the lean canvas, and you have to do design thinking process. This is from my own 2 startups that I established for developing women in business and for developing non-professional investors as a fintech product. So design thinking process, and you have to do what is called ethnographic research. Okay, you have to deeply understand what are the pain points of your potential customers. So this is examples from a product that we developed to develop women in business. So I was interviewing potential customers, women. We were doing workshops and all kinds of exercises to understand their pain points, their real pain points, in order to develop a very nice product. And you have to develop the personas, which is the typology of your potential customer. And you have to do customer journey, step by step. What is the current experience in the current reality, and what are the pain points of the customers. And I'm doing that, for example, in real estate development, in order to develop a global real estate digital twin platform for developers. And you have to do a value proposition canvas to understand what you're actually offering to the customer, and what are the pain points that you are solving. And it's based on design thinking. I will not go through the methodology very thoroughly, but basically this empathy phase, okay, that ethnographic research to identify the pain points and define them very carefully. So that's the understanding phase. And then you have the ideation phase when you suggest ideas how to solve those pain points. And then you just experimentation, PDCA. You develop prototypes or countermeasures for that matter. And you test them, and you improve them, and you test it again, and you go back to the empathy to see if you solve the real pain points, and you keep going. It's endless loops of learning and PDCA cycles. And you need to, as I said, we say in Google, spark with imagination and fuel with data. So you have to do a lot of market research. and you have to do connect analytics to understand what is happening with your customers, how do they actually behave, and then you do hands-on testing. This is a mobile application we developed, so we interviewed customers and observed. We did direct observation, like really good lean practitioners directly observe how the customer is moving their hands across the application, what is nice for them, what is not nice for them, and we took notes. So it's direct observation is super important in that phase. And I said that you need to be Toyota and Google starting from day one. So you have to develop the management system that I will elaborate about in a second. You have to develop improvement system. Even if you're a startup, you have to do Hoshin Kanri strategy deployment, even if you're a startup. And of course, objective and key results, week-to-week tracker as an example of your main objective with the key results and the main activities that needs to achieve in order to achieve the overall strategy. And just one word of the management system, what I really like and find very useful startups, but also incorporates, and it doesn't matter if it was a hospital that did a project, or it was manufacturing, or it was fintech startup. It's based on the book that you probably all know, Creating Lean Culture, that was written in Michigan University by scholars, and also David Mann, who was also a teacher in MIT. And this three-dimension management system, the visual management, which is a very important lean principle. Okay, actual versus target. So this reflection of actual versus target all the time, and also visualizing the bottlenecks. So it's also a TOC, theory of constraint based methodology, and then accountability process. So actually making sure that problems are being solved, okay, and not neglected. And leader standard work, what leaders are doing on a daily basis, on the weekly basis, on the monthly basis, to make sure that everything is alive. So very, very effective management system, visualized, totally lean application that is really relevant also for startups. So many young founders always tell me when I try to teach them that, they say, no, but I'm not a corporate. And I say, yes, this is true. But I give them the metaphor of karate. And I say to them, if you practice the kata, okay, it's a set of principles that you can practice from day one as a karate student. You will be ready for the kumite. You will be ready for the crisis. You will be ready for fighting. So if you practice this growth principle from day one, from the idea phase, and you will grow right from the beginning, you'll be definitely more ready to COVID, to any crisis that will come. So I call it the growth and the innovation kata, and it's totally like the improvement kata, same principles. So you have to practice and be ready for that. Okay, so just to summarize, what's the secret? Says the lady growth, the investor. If you want to grow, we have to learn together. It's also very important lean principle. Okay, it's managers and employees or dashi and senseis are learning together how to master both how to create 0 from 1, which is creating new ideas as a startup, but also how to master the growth and to grow 1 to 100K company. Yeah, so just a bit myself. I'm an Israeli. I've been working currently in 20 countries. In 20 years in 16 countries, over more than 20 types of industries, with different technologies, different sizes, different hospitals and others and services. Yeah, and if you have any questions, you can also find me on the social media, and I'll be happy to answer questions if you have. And thank you for listening.
Thank you for the presentation. That was a lot of the information that you presented. And I love the way that you explained the MVP in comparison to the donuts in Israel. That was quite interesting. And I will have just one question. As you mentioned, you have a lot of the experience in the transformation also and in the lean management. So what was the biggest challenge in your career, and how did you manage that?
Well, I think my biggest challenge was government. There are two types of organization that the lean transformation is really, really hard. The first one is government. The second one is city halls. But I would choose government, because governmental transformations are super hard, because there is a lot of politics involved, and there are many peoples with different disciplines are involved. And creating the sense of urgency, I think, is the key things for key result for government transformations. And to create this sense of urgency for a change, to implement lean, it's super hard. And my hardest project was to manage $30 billion over 10 years efficiency program in the Israeli Ministry of Defense and the Israel Defense Forces. We had the army of McKinsey consultants helping us, and it was the hardest transformation I ever led.
Okay, that sounds quite interesting, the government one. Okay, I don't see any other questions on the line. So once again, thank you, Effie, for your time.